Welcome to Hope for Med.
Hi, welcome back to the Hope for Med podcast. I am your host, Dr. JB, and today's featured guest is Dr. Tonya Caylor. She is a family medicine physician and a physician coach in Anchorage, Alaska. She focuses on coaching in family medicine residencies to help faculty members and residents enjoy life and thrive in their chosen careers. Welcome to the show, Dr. Caylor.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let us start from the beginning. I love hearing your origin story. So please share it with my audience.
Oh, gosh. Okay. So born and raised in Florida and trained in Mobile, Alabama for medical school and residency. And really, we did things. My husband was a physician as well. We did things not in the necessarily traditional way. We had our kids during medical school and residency, just to add a little extra layer of adventure.
Spice to your life.
Yes. And fortunately, they turned out to be well-functioning adults. So this is good news. And then, I always tell people ask me how I got to Alaska from Florida. And I just say I'm a really good wife. My husband, for 2 years, kept talking about Alaska. This was before even the reality shows were a big hit. And I finally said, "You're serious?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I said, "All right, well, let's just go check it out." And when I got off the plane and saw mountains and water and just amazing nature, I was like, okay, I think I could do this. But it was a great move because I had always wanted to get back into academic medicine, and they had a residency program here. And so I became core faculty. And I did that for about 8 years before I had my own little burnout story that we don't need to spend too much time on.
Oh, no, we're going to spend a lot of time on that one.
And then I had this period of healing where I remained as on-call faculty. So you can kind of think of that as like a PRN position where, I get pulled in when they need extra hands, and was working in a community private practice with a husband and wife that set up their practice to enjoy medicine rather than to maximize profits, go figure. And it was just, I healed. And then what I found was I had created too much margin, so to speak, in my life. And I was really missing residents. About that same time, there were social media groups that I was involved in. And I was watching so many early in their careers, want to know, how can I pay off my loans and get out of this? And what else can I do with these skills that I've burnt? They wanted to leave medicine so early. And so I was kind of saddened by that, trying to figure out how I was going to find this way to fill the needs that I was missing, curriculum development and collaboration. And so I had a friend recommend a physician coach. And I just have to say that I had never actually heard of physician coaching at all. So I was like, okay, fine, let's see. And so I hired her to kind of be in career planning, right? And I had all these ideas. There were lifestyle medicine I had been doing a lot of work in, and culinary stuff, and really wanting to make a difference in residents' lives and really help people not go down the road I went down. And she was just like, "Why don't you think about doing this in residencies?" And it was like one of those light bulb moments. And it was like all the things in one, and it just resonated. And so I got into physician coaching specifically to coach family medicine residents and their faculty. So that's how I got to where I am.
Nice. So you know how I said we're going to circle back around to your burnout story? Well, yes. Here's that time. So let's hear it. What happened?
Yes, before I actually had the terms, right? I did not know the word burnout. If you would have asked me at the time, I would have told you I was just not a quote good fit for being in a faculty role. Because especially in academic medicine, and especially in family medicine, you have so many different hats you wear. Right. So you're not just seeing patients as in the safety net clinic. You're not just teaching residents on the wards or giving them lectures. You're also advising, and you're like developing curriculum, and you're facilitating conversations with the specialists that are going to host your residents. And there are just so many different things. And I loved every single one of them. So much so that when you pair that with a little bit of, say, unhealthy perfectionism, and the job is, I had no understanding that you didn't get to your to-do list done. Like I always got my to-do list done. When you have that many roles and you're trying to do them perfectly and you can't get it done, there's a lot of like negative self-talk that goes on. That inner critic becomes, really amplified. And I also, somewhere along the way, lost my ability to be proud of how I was showing up, and became almost like desperate for external validation. I needed somebody telling me everything I did was good. So those two things, along with probably a million other little things, kind of forced my hand. And it was one of those situations where I didn't recognize, like looking back, I came home after work and could not engage with my family. I was very short with my colleagues. I had an agenda. I'm trying to get this done. What I need you to do is do your part and do it now, right? I had become impatient. I no longer had lunch times where I got to sit with friends and colleagues and chat. I was always working. So I became very disconnected. And then really getting into that like depersonalization of sitting in a patient room who has so many cards stacked against them and feeling like, what am I actually doing? What am I actually serving here? So all of that was happening. And it was just like one little hair that broke the camel's back, right? That something happened in a faculty meeting that caused me internally to overreact. And I walked out and I called a friend and said, what else can I do outside this academic world in Anchorage, Alaska? And so that's when I left, but I didn't want to leave the residency. So they allowed me to stay on as that on-call faculty. But that's kind of now my perspective looking back of what happened, if that makes a lot of sense.
So this all happened when you got to Alaska. You weren't having any symptoms before Alaska.
That's a really interesting question. So, it's funny. Let me start with the Alaska and then I'll take you back a little further. But probably a year and a half or 2 years in, we had a faculty retreat, and one of the older, more mature faculty members said, I know this job is really hard, and I know that it's hard to have work-life balance. And I said, I disagree with that. I feel like I think I have perfect work-life balance. And I meant it. Like I was so much on that high, maybe it was still the honeymoon period. So it was insidious, probably about 3 to 4 years, just a slow, insidious change that he didn't even see and recognize. Now, looking back, I will say that one of my first job out of residency, I worked for a multi-specialty clinic where I was told, I had to have 144 slots per week for patients, and I could design them how I wanted. So I had a little autonomy, which felt good. But I had little early symptoms of, those Sunday scaries, they call it, where you start dreading Monday on Sunday and you don't get to enjoy your Sunday because you're dreading Monday. I had hints of that. And I think that I didn't recognize it, obviously, but I was able to pull up my bootstraps and just get through the day, and vacations would be restorative for me, right? And so nowhere near as severe back then, but I can look back now and start to see some of those little signs.
For post-residency, but now you work with residents as So what made you decide residents? Was it because you saw signs of burnout in them at that early stage, or you just working with students, or a combination of both?
Yeah, we would take these we get just amazing residents, and we would watch these wonderful human beings, very idealistic, ready to do frontier medicine and learn it all and be out, in rural Alaska. And they just became, by the middle of their second year, angry, feeling like a victim, not what they signed up for, unhappy with everything. And I recognized that even when I was faculty members, but I was not equipped with the tools to kind of help them. I remember one of the very first times I was, I think I was precepting procedure clinic when I came back as fill-in, and I had started to learn some of these tools. And gosh, this guy was just he was like the nicest guy, and he was like the cheerleader his entire intern year. And I hadn't seen him in a few months, and I was working with him in procedure clinic, and he was just beaten down. And he was just like, everything he said was negative. And I was just like, I'm trying to avoid saying names, but I was just like, what is going on with you? And he just told me, and I said, let me tell you about where I am at my practice and how I can exercise. He said, yeah. I know you have the perfect clinic because they set it up to enjoy life and not maximize, because he heard me say that, right? It's like, yeah. But I want to tell you, did you know that our medical assistants are the ones that do our x-rays? And he said, do you know that they don't actually have the best training? And so I'm constantly having to have them reshoot the x-rays. Did you know that I don't have Epic anymore? And so as much as I used to complain about Epic, I can't run reports. I can't do anything. I can't look back and search things easily. It's very frustrating. And then I can't remember what the third one. Oh, and I said, did you know we rotate our medical assistants? I don't get my own medical assistant. And he was like, really? And I said, yeah. I said, so I could go home every single day being frustrated. And I said, but I choose to focus on, I get 30 minutes with every single patient. I get to practice medicine the way I want to. It is a wonderful environment where everybody's supportive of each other. The reason that medical assistants can rotate around is everybody's flexible. Everybody has a growth mindset. And I said, so the truth is there's good and bad, and that's going to be true no matter where you are. So right now you're feeling really negative, and what you focus on expands. And I said, so let's challenge you to start to focus on what small things are going well. And so that was the first, and he just started to open up. And I'm not going to tell you he had this miraculous story and then life was, rosy, but he just started to kind of get a foothold that maybe he could do this career. Maybe he did want to do medicine because maybe there are some good things. So that's a long-winded answer, and I don't even know if I answered your question.
I mean, I think you did, because you shared how working with those students or the residents, right, and seeing them come into residency and I am a doctor, call me doctor, literally call me doctor now because I have my MD, and how they go from being so excited to so jaded at the end, and how through utilizing the growth mindset that can change. And so I want to explore that topic a little bit if you are open to it. So what exactly do you mean by growth mindset?
Well, I think if you think of it, compare it to a fixed mindset, right? Where this is the way it's supposed to happen, and you have all these preconceived notions, and you're not opened to seeing other perspectives, right? So that growth mindset, you switch into curiosity and, what can I learn from this? None of us practice medicine perfectly, right? So instead of taking that rigid mindset and said, oh, I failed, I made a mistake, and beat yourself up, the growth mindset says, look at that. That's good for me to know right now. I'm glad I learned that now rather than 10 years from now, because now I will approach this situation better. And you start to learn how to learn those lessons to grow and to better yourself. And you get out of that kind of all or nothing thinking, right? Where you start to see the possibilities in between. So self-care, for instance, which is one of the big things that we talk about, but people will set up this, I'm going to work out 5 days a week, 30 minutes a day. And if they don't hit it, then they quit, right? Whereas the growth mindset would say, this would be my stretch goal, and I'm okay putting my tennis shoes on, walking outside for 5 minutes and seeing that as a possibility. So that it kind of gets you out of that all or nothing mindset, and you start to become a little more flexible in your ability to think about things.
How do you develop a growth mindset?
You put your mind to it, right? First, you have to know that it's an option. I mean, I think so many of us grow up, or at least I did, where you just saw things the way you were taught growing up. And that was truth. We never learned to question our own automatic thoughts about things, right? Like that was like mind-blowing to me. You mean my thoughts are optional? Well, those automatic thoughts aren't. They're going to come no matter what, because you've been conditioned and socialized, and those are your automatic thoughts, and there's no judgment. But the fact that you can like become the observer and be like, look what my brain just offered me. That's interesting. And what are 5 to 10 other ways that I could view this situation? Like that was mind blowing to me, that I actually had some agency in the way I think.
That sounds very empowering.
Yeah. And that's what I want to impart to every physician, because I think, especially now when there really isn't as much autonomy, because large healthcare organizations and insurance companies don't like offer us near as much autonomy as like, say, I have friends that are in some direct primary care practices where they have more of that, right? But when you can't control circumstance, and we know that the importance of physicians to sustain and like enjoy their careers, they have to have some agency. So if they can't change the circumstances, they've got to take agency wherever they can. And part of that is deciding how they want to see their circumstances, how they want to be a part of that circumstance, or do they want to change the circumstance? That's where they get to exercise their agency.
I think, one of the things that you said that is very interesting is looking and realizing what you have control over versus what you do not have control over. And that's sometimes very challenging.
Yes, I agree. And it's really good when you can decide. Number one, I think we have to get an accurate assessment, because many times we think we have no control, but that might not be the fullness of the truth, right? So let's really look at the options. Where do we have control? Number one. Number two, for the things we don't control, I like to say accepting them does not mean endorsing them, right? So I'll take it back to insurance companies. I have decided I no longer am giving any emotional capital to being shocked at the number of hurdles they're going to put in my patient's way to getting the care they need. I just don't, they're going to do what they do. They're insurance agencies. They care about their profits. They care about their bottom line. Of course, they're going to do that. I am no longer going to expend that emotional capital, and I am going to accept the fact that they exist. Now, does that mean I endorse the way they make us practice medicine? Absolutely not. Is it the question I ask myself is, do I need to be part of that solution? Is that in my lane? Sometimes there are things like up here, I joined in the fight for changing our licensure about how physicians have to disclose all of their medical issues forever and ever, and it becomes public record, right? It's like, is that my mind to fight? Yeah, I have plenty of patients who are physicians. I've seen many residents forego mental health because they're worried about what will happen to their licensure. That was mine to fight. This insurance company, not mine to fight. But I know that there are people out there that are even-minded, very wise, and that have the energy and bandwidth to take that on. And I believe that at some point we are going to have to overhaul this healthcare system. In the meantime, I'm taking back my agency of what I can do. I actually choose to go to bat for my patients and do the doc-to-doc, because I choose to do the right thing for my patients, right? And I can't control the insurance agency. And so I accept it. Cy Wakeman, she is an author. She's a therapist back in the day, but she writes a lot about leadership. But she talks about If you argue with reality, you're only going to lose 100% of the time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
True.
That's so true. And so when you mentioned at some point or someday we're going to have to overhaul the healthcare system, what do you mean by that?
I mean, I can only see things from my perspective, right? And so I do honestly believe that there are a lot of perspectives that I don't have. But there are a lot of injustices and waste in the system. So, personally, it doesn't align with my core values that insurance companies and CEOs of healthcare companies make millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars off the business of physicians and healthcare staff trying to improve the health of people's lives, right? So that encompasses a lot. So I don't have the answers. You know what I mean? So I just know that the pandemic highlighted, we've known these things for years, but it really brought to the forefront and highlighted many of those issues. Access to healthcare, access to quality healthcare, team-based care where you have the primary care and the subspecialist involved. I just got a glimpse. We had an issue with my oldest daughter where we ended up taking her to Mayo Rochester. And it was like, what in the world, right? Like they had all these tests, all the specialists had talked to each other. They did all of these things and we sat down and we got a full overview of all the ways forward. And it was just like, and I don't even know that happens every single time for every patient at Mayo, but it was just a glimpse of what healthcare could be from the quality standpoint of it, right? But yeah, so I can see a lot of pieces that are broken. I can see, I can remember back to dictating notes in that very first, 1999, when I finished residency and joined that multi-specialty group. They had just started, it was kind of a blended model of EMR and dictation. So we dictated and we would say dot code if anything was to go in the problem list or in the medication list or whatever. But anyhow, I'm just talking and I can talk a whole lot faster than I can enter in something into a data entry base. But I can remember how fast my notes were then, right? So, I mean, there are so many hurdles. And I think part of it is losing some of the socialization that has happened over the years in medicine. When the word resident got its word for you actually lived at the hospital when you were in training, right? Getting back from that, you have dedicated, this is your full vocation, you have dedicated your life to it. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't be really having that altruism and love and passion for what we do, but it doesn't have to be all consuming. And so I think some of that still exists. I think some of the hierarchy in medicine needs to dissipate. At the same time, giving respect to experience, right? So I think there's a lot of issues that I see are broken, but again, a long-winded answer to say, I don't have the answers.
But I think that is just very telling in terms of how, connected you are with yourself to be able to say, I don't have the answers, because that's also one of the limitations that we sometimes have as healthcare professionals, as physicians, to say, I don't know. I see this problem. I know it exists, but I honestly don't know. And that takes a lot of strength to be able to even just say those words.
Yeah, it's true. And giving credit to this generation of residents, I'm not going to say all of them, but a bigger percentage than when I was in training are willing to say that to a patient or a patient family member. And I think that is so wonderful because we're moving in the direction. And they learn to follow up. I don't know, but I'm going to help you find out. Right. So the patient doesn't feel abandoned.
Exactly.
Right. And so I so appreciate that there are, and even early career faculty members that I've worked with who have really opened up to that, their own strength and being able to say that. I really appreciate it. And I think patients really appreciate that too, because, you know, they can see through, all of the stuff, right?
Yeah, they can. They can. So it looks like, you know, from when you went through your burnout period, you have really focused on your mindset.
Yeah. First and foremost, absolutely. That has been, over the last 5 years, that has taken a huge shift, and really into all, you know, categories of my life, right? Not just work, not just my business, but also with relationships and family members and friends and community. So much needed. I still have much growth to go, but I am learning to do that from a self-compassion place rather than a judgmental place.
So self-compassion, can we talk about that a little bit? I love that word, and I love utilizing that. But tell me, how do you define self-compassion?
I would say it's different from self-pity, where you're just miserable and, you know, just like wallowing in all the unfairness or sadness or, you know, whatever. Whereas self-compassion is really having that empathy for yourself, for the fact, like, you are part of the human race, and you also, talking to myself, you also deserve empathy and compassion, because all of these things that, you know, I'm still peeling back the onion layers, right, of all the things that I was socialized with. Like, I could have a lot of judgment around that, or I can be like, oh, well, it turns out that I'm human, and this is what humans do when they're in this setting. And being like, of course it is. So it's just understanding and meeting myself where I am, right? Instead of, I mean, I think, like, how many of us got through medical school and residency by using a whip on ourselves? You got to do better. You're failing. You've got to prove yourself. And, you know, that works for an extent. You know, we can muster up some willpower and just suck it up. But, like, realizing the fact that if you do that from a compassionate place, I think that the fear for me when I first started doing this was like, oh my gosh, if I have self-compassion, am I just going to, like, not care, and I'm going to give up, and I'm going to become this mediocre, you know, person? But no, actually, it actually frees you to move forward and growth even more. And I mean, I have to credit Krista Neff and many other people who have taught me things out of her research. So,
because you're not spending time beating yourself up, because it's not like, oh, you say one negative thing and that's the end. No, you just keep harping at it, right?
Yeah. And it doesn't mean you can't see room for growth. I can assess and be like, wow, next time I would like not to say those words. That didn't come across the way I intended, right? But beating myself up and ruminating, perseverating on it, all it does is, like, make me more miserable. It doesn't help me get to the next level of, okay, how can I say that in a way that is heard better, right?
That's absolutely right. So I see how your experience working with that physician coach completely changed your life.
Yes, absolutely. She was a huge part of what I believe is my ordained, like, journey, right? Like, right place, right time, and help me kind of get clarity on a lot of things. So, yeah.
So if my listener wanted to find out more about you and what you do, how can they get in touch with you?
They could go to my website. It's www.joyandfamilymedicine.com. Also, I have a blog on there. So if they're not necessarily looking to have a coach, but they just want to kind of read more about mindset and everything, blogs on my website. So, and yeah.
And do you have any final pearls of wisdom for my listener?
I would say one of the big things I love to encourage physicians, no matter if you're in training or 20 years out of training, is to look at 3 areas of decreasing unnecessary suffering. Number 1, self-care is not selfish. What do you need to give yourself? Because by giving it to yourself, you're going to be able to show up better for your patients. You're going to be more efficient and present. 2 is look where you're confusing altruism with people pleasing or a toxic part of that. Really serving people from a place that feels good. It energizes you, and people pleasing leads to resentment. So look where you're confusing those 2 and give yourself permission to stop people pleasing. And the 3rd is the concept of that mindset of looking where you can take back some emotional control, where you could get to have emotional independence rather than riding the waves of all the circumstances around you or what people did around you. Like, look for ways that you can start thinking of things differently so you can take back a little bit of your emotional control.
Yeah. Who says a doc can't rap? DOCTORJB. The greatest doctor to ever touch the mic. The greatest podcast ever broadcasted or pre-recorded. Come learn some. Each one teach one. I'm done.